watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Mordechai Becher. Welcome to Shalom TV, Dimensions of the Daf, which we look at a different section of Talmud, Mishnah, Gemara, and commentaries every week, and give some insight into it and try to develop some ideas, give you just an understanding of what Talmud's about and Jewish thought, Jewish law, etc. Although each class stands by itself, independent unit, you don't need to have seen the previous or know the next one. Each one stands by itself, but I encourage people to get as broad understanding as possible. Watch a few because they're all on all different subjects and different texts, etc. So I'm going to depart a little bit from our regular Talmud text, and I want to look at something which is based on the Talmud. It's actually a commentary on the Mishnah and what I call principles of belief. This is based on Maimonides, and Maimonides, those who are not familiar with him, known in Hebrew as Rav Moshe ben Maimon, Rabbi Moses, son of Maimon, which is, in English, we call him Maimonides, Moses, son of Maimon, in Hebrew Rambam, lived from 1200s, born in Spain, had to flee. His father was a judge in the Jewish courts, and they had to flee Spain due to Islamic persecution, and eventually went to Morocco, where they had to run away from Morocco due to Islamic persecution again. Run away from Morocco, they went to Israel. He was in Israel for a very short time and apparently was in danger due to crusaders, Christian persecution, and eventually went to Egypt and found refuge in Egypt. And in Egypt is where he became very, very famous. He wrote numerous works. His most famous work is his 14-volume Code of Law, which has everything you need to know to be a good Jew is right there in his 14-volume Code of Law, written in excellent, beautiful Hebrew, and became very, very popular. One of his earliest works was his commentary on the Mishnah, which is what we're going to be looking at a little bit. His commentary on the Mishnah was written in Arabic. That was the language of most Jews at the time. He wrote Guide for Perplexed, his famous work of philosophy, Jewish philosophy. He wrote various works on medical ideas. He was a physician. He was actually the physician of the government, the court of Salah al-Din, Saladin. You may have heard of Saladin, conquered Jerusalem from the Crusaders. So he was a patient of Maimonides. And in addition, he wrote many, many other books, logic and mathematics, and many books of Torah thought and commentary. One of the things he's most famous for was that in his commentary on the Mishnah, he formulated the basic principles of Jewish belief. I have on the screen here, of course, that's in Hebrew, so not very helpful to many of you. Well, basically, this is what we know is this is printed in virtually every Jewish prayer book. Right after morning service, we have printed this, which is the 13 principles of faith. Ani ma'amin be'emunah shleima. I believe with perfect faith that the Creator, blessed be He, creates and runs and supervises everything, and He alone does, and will do all actions. Now this text, what's called the Ani Ma'amin, I believe, is actually not written by Maimonides. It's an anonymous shortening, condensation of Maimonides' original 13 principles. We find them also in some famous songs in the prayer book. Some of you may be familiar with this. This is known as Yigdal. A lot of synagogues sing it after prayers. Yigdal Elohim Chai. It's a 13-verse poem, each verse of the poem is another one of the 13 principles of faith of Maimonides. So it is printed in the prayer books before prayers. So it's interesting. A lot of, in your average prayer book, you open it up. So you've got, before morning service, we have Yigdal, so that I start my morning prayers with a poem that has the 13 principles of faith of Maimonides. We go through the morning service, and then at the end of it is printed, again, more explicitly, but Maimonides' 13 principles of faith. So both before and after the service, it is customary that both before and after we recite these. So I thought I would look at what they are and how we can categorize them. Here is the English. I believe that God exists. Number 2, that he is one, the unity of God. Number 3, he is not corporeal, meaning he has no body, no physical manifestation, and no physical description. Number 4, he is eternal. Number 4 is eternal. Next screen. Number 5, devotion to God. I cannot pray to anything else other than God. Not to angels, not to people, not to intermediaries. Number 6, the existence of prophecy. God speaks to people. Number 7, the prophecy of Moses is superior to all other prophets. Number 8, Torah is from heaven. That means God transmitted the Torah to Moses without intermediary and without any doubts. Number 9, the Torah is eternal. And then on the next screen, God is omniscient, he knows everything. That God rewards those who are good and punishes those who are evil. If not in this world, then in the world to come. Number 12, that there will be a redemption. The Messiah will come and there'll be a final redemption and the world will go back or will return to its pre-sin state. And number 13, that at that time there will also be God will bring back to life those who are righteous people who have died, what we call the resurrection. So we have 13 principles of faith. So a couple of words about this, and Maimonides chooses to have put these 13 principles and to have placed them in his commentary on the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, where the Mishnah there talks about people who have somehow severed themselves from the world to come. It talks about, it's in the 10th chapter of Sanhedrin, which is really an unusual place to have it, because Sanhedrin deals with the laws of the courts, jurisprudence. And the chapter immediately preceding this deals with the death sentence, capital crimes. So right afterwards, we have a Mishnah which says all of Israel has a portion in the world to come. Now, the reason that Mishnah follows capital crimes, it's a way of telling us that in the same way that everyone is born with a right to life. I don't have to earn a right to life. I don't have to prove my right to life. I don't have to, I have an inherent right to life. I have an inherent life. God gave me life. It's inherent. I don't have to prove that. I don't have to defend it to anyone. I don't have to justify it. It just is. So in the same way, the next Mishnah says, in the same way as you have a right to life in the physical world, you also have a right to life in the spiritual world, in the world to come, life after death. But in the same way that a person can do actions that sever themselves from this life, they could commit suicide, it will be prohibited, but they have the ability to do so. A person has the ability to, they may do a crime, which is a capital crime, in which case they've forfeited their right to life. They may try to attack someone, in which case the person may defend themselves by killing them, in which case they've also forfeited their right to life. So there are numerous things you can do which a person forfeits their connection to life. In the same way, we have an inherent connection, our soul has an inherent connection to the spiritual, an inherent connection to the spiritual worlds. As such, I don't have to justify that, I don't have to defend it, I don't have to prove that I have that. It just is. I have a connection to the spiritual world. However, in the same way that a person can sever themselves from their right to physical life, in the same way the person can do something to deserve loss of that physical life, unfortunately, a person is also capable of severing themselves from spiritual life. A person is capable of doing something that will sever their connection to that spiritual life. And a person is capable of committing, so to speak, spiritual suicide in the same way that they can commit physical suicide. So that Mishnah says one of those categories is a person who is called an apikoros. Epicurus, some say, is from the Greek Epicurean, who would have denied and not believed in any of our principles of faith. Others say it is from the Aramaic word afkurta, which is based on the Hebrew hefker, which means ownerless. A person who has declared himself ownerless. I don't have a master, meaning they've said, God is not my master. They've thrown off the yoke, so to speak. Either way, right, that's where Maimonides, on that Mishnah, says, okay, he says, if a person can sever themselves from the world to come by disbelief, he says, what are the basic beliefs? What are the basic beliefs? And I should point out that which Maimonides said, the basic beliefs, is not without controversy. There are those who say, what do you mean basic beliefs? You have to believe everything in the Torah. How can you only give me 13 things? Count how many verses there are in the Torah, that many tens of thousands, that's what you have to believe in. So they were upset and disagree with Maimonides only giving us 13. There were others who said, what do you mean 13? There's only 3. Belief in God, belief in Torah from heaven, and reward and punishment. If you don't have any of those, if any one of those 3 doesn't exist, then the whole of Judaism collapses. Those are the minimum principles you have to have. That there is a God, that he transmitted his instructions to us, and that there is reward and punishment. They said, other than that, nothing. So, and there were those who, there are various arguments about it, but the formulation of belief that seems to have been the most popular, seems to have survived the most, and seems to have been accepted by so many great scholars and so many simple Jews and so many of diverse communities, whether it was Sephardim, these Jews of the Middle East and North Africa, whether it was Ashkenazim, Jews of Europe, whether it was Hasidim, or whether it was the opponents of the Hasidim, whether it was the Kabbalists or the non-Kabbalists. There has been a tremendously wide acceptance of Maimonides' 13 principles. But how are we to understand that? When someone says, is it not true? I mean, if I'm a believing Jew, I believe everything in the Torah. So why would we formulate 13 principles? So I think, just as a brief explanation, Maimonides seems to be saying this, that ultimately the person's goal here in this world is to have a relationship with God. And the only thing that remains of us is our soul. I point to here because the brain is the seat of the soul. It's the interface with the soul. So that's what remains. The soul is composed of the beliefs, the commitments, and the intellectual side of me is what remains, not my physical side. The soul is what remains. So he says that relationship that the soul has with God has certain minimum requirements. Any relationship has certain minimum requirements. For example, I strike up a conversation with someone, we're schmoozing, we're talking. And while I'm talking, I develop this belief that this person I'm speaking with is actually an alien from outer space. He's invaded. And he's got this horrific reptilian face, but he's got a human rubber mask on. Now, if I develop this belief about this person as I'm speaking to him, could I have a normal relationship? Maybe in California, yes, but can I have a normal relationship with this person if I believe he's an alien? Of course not. Or let's say I believe this person I'm speaking with has multiple personality disorder. The famous guy like Sybil, what does she have? 16 right? And I believe this person has got a severe case of multiple personality disorder or some type of schizophrenia. So obviously, it's not going to be possible for me to have a normal relationship with him. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be a barrier. If I believe the wrong things about this person, I believe that he is a axe murderer, I believe that he is an agent of the CIA, I believe that he is, which is not necessarily contradictory, right, etc., etc. If I believe all these things about him, obviously there's going to be huge barriers in our relationship. For me to have a relationship with someone requires that I accept certain truths about them. I accept and I deny certain falsehoods about them. So the same is true with God. I cannot have a complete and wholesome relationship with God if I think that there's 3 of him. That's a misconception. If I cannot have a complete relationship with God if I think that he's physical, that he has a body, because that's a misconception. It's a mistake. I could be a wonderful person. I could do many acts of charity and kindness and so on and so forth. I could be imitating God in action. But as long as I have misconceptions about God's reality, as long as I have falsehoods in my mind about Him, then obviously there's going to be a barrier in the relationship. So Maimonides is trying to tell us what are the minimum pieces of knowledge, the minimum facts that I have to have in order to have a minimum relationship with God. That's what these 13 principles are. He's not telling us the principles upon which the Torah falls or stands. He might agree that there's only 3 of those: belief in God, Torah from heaven, and reward and punishment. That may be. But he is talking about what are the basics that I have to know in order to have this relationship with God. What are the things that I have to know? I have to know that God is one. I have to know that He exists. I have to know that He's one. I have to know that He's not a body. I have to know that He's not limited. I have to know that He's eternal. I have to know that our relationship is exclusive. There's no intermediaries. I have to know that He's given me certain instructions. I have to know that He's concerned with justice. I have to know that He rewards and I have to know that there's a plan in the world. All of these things are things that I should be aware of. I have to know. If I've denied them, that's going to be a barrier, a flaw, a scar in the relationship. That is how Maimonides seems to understand it. And those, I think, are the idea of these 13 principles. And it is interesting that Maimonides, in his original Arabic, uses a term that is not actually emunah. Now, in the Hebrew, which I showed you, it says ani mamin, I believe. It's interesting that the term that Maimonides uses in the original Arabic is an Arabic word, I might excuse my pronunciation, but atakad. So atakad does not mean belief. It is translated by Maimonides as da'at, which in Hebrew means knowledge. And there is a difference between the two. Knowledge, or da'at, da'as, or da'at, knowledge is something where the thing is so much a part of me that it is my very essence, and if you take it away from me, I'm a different person. So, for example, the fact that I know that I exist. I know I exist. Leaving aside cogito ergo sum, leaving aside I think therefore I am, but I know I exist. If you would take that knowledge away, I couldn't function as a regular human being if I didn't have that knowledge. It is part and parcel of me. It's not something which I can prove, and it's not something which I can examine from outside of myself, but it is part and parcel of me and of my worldview. And there are certain things I know which is not just like a fact. I know certain facts. Right? I know Kowloon is in the area of Hong Kong, right? I know that penguins live in the Antarctic, and all these facts, they're not really dart. They are not things which, if you take them away from me, I won't exist anymore. I won't be me. So Maimonides wants us to know that these principles, a principle of dart, that means things I have to know, not just believe in, but actually have to know that actually have to be part of the way I look at the world. It's a German word. It's not a popular word, it used to be used more often, but the word is Weltanschauung, which means the way I look at the world, my world outlook. So these 13 principles are that when I look at the world, I have to look at it through these 13 principles. They're part of my dart. So let's have a look at the 13 principles. I want to give you really, they fit into 3 different categories, which is why I have them on 3 separate screens, aside from, otherwise I'd have to have a font which would be too small for any normal human being to see. But they're 3 separate screens because they are divided into 3 categories. The first 4 are aspects of belief about the nature of God Himself. Number 1, that God exists. That He created the world. That He created time. That everything exists, so to speak, only because He chooses that it should exist. He is not dependent upon the world is dependent upon Him. Very central, very central. That is indicated in the verse, I am the Lord your God, took you out of Egypt. First of the 10 commandments is a statement. God says, I am God. So that knowledge that God exists, that He created the world, that He is, etc. That's number 1. Number 2, unity of God. That the Creator is one and is a oneness which is absolutely unique. People, that is to say, a oneness which cannot be divided into any smaller components. A oneness which is incomparable to anything, either mathematically or physically. A oneness which is the absolute oneness, which is a oneness which is almost totally beyond, actually is totally beyond our comprehension, but we can talk about it and we can try to understand it, but really there's nothing in our world, because everything in our world is composite. Everything in our world is complex, composed of many components, whether it be mathematical numbers, whether it be objects, whether it be whatever you want, is always divisible, is always complex, and is always not unified. Whereas God is the ultimate in unity. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Number 3 is that he is not corporeal. That is to say, God has no body. He is not incarnated into a body, never was, never will be. It's a limitation. There are no limitations on God. Physicality is a limitation. And God doesn't have, we cannot even describe him totally, because any description is automatically some type of limitation. As in the Greek, it describes, it creates a circle around something. And the eternity of God, that he is eternal, nothing preceded him, nothing follows him. He was the creator of time itself. He is totally unbound by anything that comes before him, and therefore he has absolutely and total free will. So you'll note those first 4 are all statements about God himself. The next 5, from 5 till 9, they deal with God's instructions and interaction with the world, his relationship with us in different ways. For example, the first is devotion to God, that prayer is only allowed directly to God. In fact, and I think we may have, I don't remember if we did a class about this once, but maybe it's a good idea to do it. In Jewish tradition, it is prohibited to pray to an angel. It is prohibited to pray to a rabbi. It is prohibited to pray to a righteous person, either dead or alive. When we go to a grave, to visit a grave, we do not, God forbid, pray to the deceased, ever. We pray to God in the merit of the deceased. We pray at the graveside because we're inspired there by this righteous person. But we never pray to the person. We only pray to God alone. That's it. No intermediaries, no angels, no steps in between, direct connect. That's again our relationship. That God speaks to us directly, i.e. the existence of prophecy. That's number 6. And of course that the prophecy of Moses was qualitatively and authoritatively superior to all other prophets, because of course this is the basis of the Torah being our absolute authority. Even if someone comes later on and says, look at this miracle that I have done, and we say, yes, it's a very impressive miracle, and he says, great, now Shabbos is on Tuesday, Sabbath is Tuesday, we'd say, to heck with you. You could do as many miracles as you want, my friend, right? But if you're contradicting the prophecy of Moses, forget about it, right? So therefore, number 7 is the superiority of the prophecy of Moses. Again, that's how God chose to communicate to us his absolute words. Number 8 is Torah from heaven. That is to say that the transmission process of Torah is pure and unadulterated, and that the entire Torah is of importance. There's omni-significance. Everything in the Torah is significant. Everything in the Torah is from God, which means, as Maimonides puts it, a verse which apparently is insignificant to you, like the Lotam was Timnah's concubine, right, is as divine as the verse, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And finally, number 9, the eternity of Torah. Torah that God gave is eternal. He doesn't change his mind. He doesn't get the fickle finger of fate award. If he chose us and he chose the Torah and he gave us the Torah is an expression of his will, and his will is eternal and perfect. So he doesn't have to change his mind. He doesn't produce a beta version and then, the Torah 3.01, which will not crash this time. God does not Microsoft. He doesn't need to do that. Right? God produced the perfect Torah the first time, and that's his expression of his will. That doesn't change. So you'll note that number 1 to 4 were all about God himself, belief in God. God is one. God is eternal. God is not corporeal. Number 5 till 9 deal with God's relationship to us. Torah from heaven, i.e. we pray directly to God. He speaks directly to us. He gave us the Torah through Moses. The Torah's transmission was perfect and unadulterated. The entire Torah is from heaven, and the Torah is eternal. That's all about Torah. And the third category, which is number 10 to 13, The last 4, that deals with reward and punishment. Number 10, God knows everything, omniscient. He's cognizant of everything and concerned with things. This is, I guess, opposed to the Hellenistic view that which God is so elevated beyond the world, he doesn't really care what's going on. No, we say he knows everything and he does care. Reward and punishment, he will reward those who do that which is correct. He will punish those who don't. Divine providence, reward and punishment, divine justice, etc. The days of the Messiah, of course, that's the ultimate reward, because that's when the world will come to fruition, when everything will be fulfilled, and that those who, the righteous, will indeed get ultimate reward of, so to speak, being back in Eden to a certain degree. And number 13, which is a corollary of that, is the idea that the reward will come to a human. Just a pure soul is not human, and a pure body is not human. Body, if it's just a body, it's an animal. If it's just a soul, that's an angel. But the body and the soul combined, which in the resurrection will be those who receive that reward, that will be a human. So a human receives the reward. That's the basic idea. So now you may have noted those 3 categories are also the 3 categories that I mentioned before as those who argued with Maimonides and said there's only 3 principles, which is belief in God, belief in Torah from heaven, and belief in reward of punishment. You'll note that the 3 categories that Maimonides has fits in perfectly with those 3 principles, right? The number 1 to 4, belief in God. Number 5 to 9. Now, the truth is, number 5 is arguable about which category it belongs to. Number 5 is, I pray only to God himself. So that might be under the nature of God, or it might be under my relationship with God and his relationship with us. I'm not absolutely certain which it is. My feeling is it probably more belongs to the second category, because it's really about relationship rather than about God's existence. So those 5, prophecy of Moses, eternity of Torah, sanctity of Torah, etc., that is the idea of Torah from heaven. And of course the last 4 would be reward, punishment, and divine providence. So according to Maimonides, these are the central principles of Judaism. That is not to say that anything else is unimportant, and not to say that the commandments are not important. Obviously, we're focused on doing that which we have to do. But it should not be, it's a mistake to think that Judaism has no principles of belief. There are those who would feel that it's more a religion of action. As long as you do the right action, it doesn't matter what's going through your mind. However, that is ignoring the idea that our goal here is to have a relationship with God. And having a relationship is not just a matter of actions. It's a matter of thought and emotion as well. Just as a relationship with another person, it's not sufficient just to do the right actions to that person. You've also got to have a certain feeling, and you've got to have a certain intellectual relationship as well. So it's a combination of things. Certainly, when we talk about a relationship of the soul with God, it's something which takes place primarily in the intellect. The actions mold the soul, and the actions affect the soul, and the actions make the soul more compatible with God. But even if you've done the right actions, if you're missing out in terms of basic understandings of God, his relationship to the world, his etc., then a person's going to have a barrier between them and God. There's going to be a flaw in the relationship, and that is going to be a big problem. So that is a little bit of an introduction to Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith. This has been Mordechai Becher, Rabbi Becher, I'm a rabbi, whatever. Mordechai Becher at Shalom TV, Dimensions of the Daf. If you'd like to see me at other venues, live, etc., go to gatewaysonline.com and our seminars, etc. And if you'd like my book, Gateway to Judaism, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Jewish bookstores, etc. Thank you very much for watching, and hope that you will watch next time. Bye.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who can send a tax-deductible contribution of $36 or more to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media to help support our programming. Please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD, and we thank you for your kind support.